the exes being crazy thing, like, not that, I don't know, it is hard because, okay, I'm going to cut people the tiniest bit of slack. Some people are crazy. Some people are like emotionally immature, and sometimes you end up dating them and then you don't know until you're actually dating them that they are emotionally mature, crazy, delusional, whatever. So there are probably some good people that have like a crazy ex, you know? I'm sure I've said, oh, that guy's crazy. And it's like, does that mean that I am completely toxic and it was all my fault? I don't think so.
Right.
But I do think that if someone says like all of my exes are crazy, or like, I don't know, just tells you 100% of the bad things that they did, but they were with them for years, that also does say something about the person that's saying my exes were crazy. Like,
yeah.
Because why were you with, if they were actually genuinely crazy and they did all of that stuff over a year, why did you stay with them?
Right.
That means you're probably crazy too.
Yeah,
you know?
I know. And I feel like you could kind of like track the lines of like, if you're saying that about every person that you're dating, not every person could be that way.
Yeah. Or you just have a really bad like radar on picking people, and like you're probably falling into like toxic habits that you don't want to admit. But like if you look back on them, you probably did do something. You probably cut them slack in places that you shouldn't have. And you probably should have set better boundaries if every single person you're dating is like turning out the same way. I don't know. Also, I kind of want to redact my statement that I made 2 minutes ago where I said, if you stayed with a crazy person for a year, you're probably crazy too. That's not necessarily what I mean, because I'm not saying like, I don't know. I feel like that's almost like victim blaming, you know? I don't mean it like that. I'm just meaning like, if you're staying with someone whose character is clearly so bad and you don't like their character because you genuinely think they have all of these things wrong with them, then yeah, why did you stay with them for so long? Like, that's also something that maybe should be discussed, you know?
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of times when people are in like toxic relationships like that, you like almost crave the toxicity, and it's really hard to get yourself out of that pattern.
Yes.
So it requires like a lot of work, and it's not necessarily your fault, but it does require a level of like self-awareness maybe, where you're like, this is toxic and like what I'm yearning for is not good for me mentally. It's like giving me that like rush of like whatever it is that I'm looking for, but like it's not good for me, and 100%. Like I'm stuck in this cycle. 100%. But sometimes like it doesn't necessarily mean that you're crazy. It's hard to sometimes see that though when you're in it.
Yes.
And you have to almost like take a step back and pull yourself out of it, and then you have to put in work on yourself to get yourself out of that situation a lot of times.
I 100% agree. There is like something that is exciting in some people's human brain revolving around like fighting or like drama or craziness. Yeah. I guess what I mean too is like, if you like, I'm literally thinking of someone that I know that this is why I had the thought of like, oh, why did you stay with them for so long? Or like, why did you continue this? Was because it was a couple that broke up. And the guy said, oh, she's crazy. Like, my ex is crazy. But they still kept like going back to each other for like a year and a half after their breakup. And the whole time he's saying, oh, well, she's crazy. So like she's doing all these crazy things and like hurting me. It's like, well, you are also making the choice to go back to her when you are obviously feeling negatively about her and you think that she's crazy. So if you genuinely think that she's crazy, why do you keep going back to her now that she's your ex over and over again? In that situation would be like the example of like, well, what are you doing wrong? Because if you were a good, like if you had really good like judgment of character, you probably wouldn't keep going back to the same crazy, I'm using your words, not mine, girl.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And you're like, I feel like that's when you need to, like, why aren't you drawing that boundary for yourself?
Exactly. That's what I mean.
If this person really is treating you like this badly or they're really that like batshit, you're allowing them in your life. You know what I mean? So at some point you have to, and like, obviously there's like stalkers and things like that where it's like, I can't get away from this. Like I'm trying everything. If you're willingly going back to them, but then talking that way about them, you're kind of just at fault, just as much as at fault as they are for allowing them to bring that behavior into your life.
100%. Especially if it's literally the whole reason why you broke up is because she's crazy. It's like, okay, well then act on that. Like you saw it. You obviously are not okay together. Act on it. Like, why are you not acting on it? Like you can't complain about someone and how crazy they are and then go back to them as an ex, like your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, and go back to them every 3 months and hook up or do whatever and pretend everything's okay, and then leave them for 3 months and talk about how crazy they are, but then go back to them and then do the same thing all over again for a year and a half. Like that's where it's like, okay, we're both making mistakes here.
Right. I know. And I feel like it's so easy to like be like, oh, they're so crazy. Like with like, you know, they always want this or they always want that. And like some people are just looking for different things in relationships
So
too at the end of the day. So like, that's why like, I feel like with my experience with dating, if like there's someone that I feel like they need to be like texting 24/7 or like this or that, where I'm like, oh my God, like this, like it might be driving me crazy. You know what I mean? But like, then that's when I'll be like, hey, I'm really sorry. But like, I think that this is what you're looking for. And like, I don't think that I could give you that because that's just not how I operate. And like, I think that this is what you're trying to get out of a relationship. And like, communication is important to me, but like not all the time. You know what I mean? Like while I'm at work, like I don't want an expectation to be that I'm like answering every text because I'm not even on my phone. So like, I can't give you what you need in this relationship. So I'm really sorry. Like this is where, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're crazy, but they just need something else from a relationship that you can't give them or that you're not, you know, on the same page about. And I feel like that's okay to be that way. You know what I mean? Some people want that too, but
that is such a good point, because just because like you don't align with someone, it doesn't mean they're crazy. And the fact that you could be like emotionally mature enough and just mature enough in general to recognize that just because you don't align with someone doesn't necessarily mean that they're crazy. And just because they have a want for their relationship that isn't the same as your want doesn't mean they're crazy, even if the want may seem like more intense than your want, you know? Like that's such a good point. I actually dated someone that we were talking about exes, and I remember I was like, this is the biggest green flag like I've ever experienced so far, you know, because I had this like string of like, okay, not good, not good, not good, not good. And then I met this one guy who was like talking about his ex, and he was like, yeah, she's not a bad person, just not for me. But then when we dug deeper into like, because we talked about like, why did this relationship not work out and what are you looking for that's different like for future relationships, and just like the way that he talked about her, like there are certain things where objectively you could have been like, dude, that's crazy, like she needs to grow up or like something like that. He never said that. He was just like, yeah, just not for me, just not for me, nice girl, not for me. Like that's the only way he would describe her. And I was like, that is just such a green flag. Like, whereas so many other people would be like, oh, she's freaking crazy and like needs to grow up. Like you just don't even need to say that about people that you're not dating. Like you don't need to insult every single person that you're not meant to date, you know?
Yeah. And I think it makes it harder. Like if you were to say to them like, hey, I can't give you this in a relationship, like, I'm really sorry. If they don't accept your word and they like keep bothering you and keep reaching out and like, you know what I mean? Over and over again, or like, again, showing up places that you are, like something like that to me is then it's like, whoa, like this is a bigger issue. You know what I mean? But if they accept it, like after you're realizing this, like maybe that's just how they operate and like, that's okay. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't mean that they're crazy.
Yeah.
Just like what they need out of a relationship is something that you can't give them or you're not interested in.
Yes.
But again, it could, you know, I've dated other people, like I think it really has just been one person where it's like, they just like, remember like every month I'm like getting a text and I'm like, hey, like this was very clear. So then I just like had to stop answering. And that's the point where it's like, I made very clear my boundaries and you're not respecting that. Like something's up over there. Like you gotta leave me alone. You know what I mean? But
yes. Also, I do want to like clarify that I've definitely had people from my past that I've said they're crazy. And I kind of feel bad about it because while I may have thought that at the time, like, it's like, whatever, like everyone makes mistakes, you know, everyone is caught up in emotion at some point and like sends a text that is like a novel and you're like, holy shit, or like, I don't know. Not that I'm cutting everyone's slack, but like, I'm just trying to be real. I've definitely literally done, because I feel like the red flag thing is like saying, oh, that my ex is crazy. Like, I've literally said that. But
no, same. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we're all guilty of it. Yeah. You throw, and again, you throw that word around, like, you know what I mean? Like everyone throws that word around.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, people throw it around.
But, and it's hard too with just dating in general. You know what I mean? Because you're like, you want this to work. I'm feeling these emotions because I'm like, oh my God, like here's another one that's like not going to work out. I think it's understandable. You know?
And then also I do feel bad for saying like, well, then why did you stay with them for so long? Because sometimes you don't know that someone's crazy until after you break up.
Yeah, no,
and
it's hard to.
Yeah, you could be like, well, why were you with them for so long? You didn't see it. And it's like, well, no, they were a really good liar. Or they like, we weren't together long enough to face any like hardships. And then the hardships came out and they acted completely different, like something like that. So it's really not black and white. So I feel like, I don't know. I just want to take back any blanket statements that I made. Also, some people are just crazy. So I've definitely said people from my past are crazy. And I kind of agree with it still. So like, I don't know. It's just like hard to.
Yeah, and in those situations, like people could be getting manipulated and not realize it.
100%.
So that's the point where it's like, you know, it's not like that's where I feel like the victim blaming and things like that come into play. But
yes,
and like I don't think either of us are trying to do that. At all.
Just to clarify, we're not trying to like blanket statements. I feel like I make blanket statements a lot, and then I'm like, well, do you even think that? So,
and it could all be applied to different situations.
100%.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Yeah.